failed gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake has been holding rallies celebrating her election loss, saying that she actually won, as she's been doing. And it's just such a bizarre moment, as I've said many times, in American history, where we have this dynamic. Trump did it too, where you go around and tour and hold rallies and have people cheer for you saying that you actually won when you lost. It should be sad, but they think it's amazing. It's wild. And I want to show you some moments from a rally she did in Iowa, in Nevada, Iowa. And the way we'll break this down is first look at this first clip that honestly got me laughing really hard because of how, I gotta find a more intellectual word for dumb. Profoundly incorrect thing that she says in this got me laughing. And then we'll look at a little bit of reporting and her floating a Senate run, and then the second clip from this Iowa rally that is wild as well. But starting with this one.
We're just getting started. I will work so hard with my last breath to make sure we have reformed elections, because my dad was a high school football coach. He was a history teacher and a government teacher, and so we learned a lot about history at home. And I know that our founding fathers, I think about John Hancock when he signed his signature nice and big. He wanted King George to see it. I mean, that's bravery. Can you imagine going against those globalists? We know what George...
Wait, who do you think she's about to bring up? Okay, she's talking about King George and how he was a globalist. And then we're fighting globalists of our own here. You know where this is going. Ready? Get the name in your head. Who's the big globalist boogeyman? Ready, go.
Can you imagine going against those globalists? We know what George Soros is like. King George was kind of the same thing, but even bigger. Our founding fathers, this ragtag...
Yeah, you know, the revolutionaries who fought to be free from the reign of King George. It's like us and fighting to be free from George Soros. Wow. And that globalist term, you know, all the different connotations of that.
Team of patriots said, we don't want to bow down to King George. We want to fight for our rights. We want to have our own country where we have religious freedom, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms. And they created the most amazing, exceptional country this world's ever seen, and the most amazing document outside the Bible in the United States Constitution. And I don't want that those men and women died in vain. I don't want to give up that right to vote. That right to vote is the most important thing. We don't want some globalist deciding what our future is. We want to decide it. And unless we have the right to vote and it is fair and honest, then we don't have a country. And we got to do everything we can before 24.
I agree that we need to protect the right to vote, and that's why she should call upon her party, the Republican Party, to stop all these actions that are attempting to restrict and make it more difficult for people to vote. But then we get to, and again, I remind you that we'll wrap up the segment with another clip from this rally. But before we do that, here's a little bit from the Washington Post on this dynamic playing out within the Republican Party. Bad candidates and stolen election fever might well have cost the GOP control of the Senate in both the 2020 and 2022 elections. The party may have its best shot to take it back in the next election in 2024, and yet those problems are suddenly looming large again. Fresh signals in recent days suggest that two of the GOP's most flawed 2022 candidates are lining up Senate bids. In Pennsylvania, the Washington Post reports, former gubernatorial candidate Doug Mastriano is expected to run, and he's expected to run for Senate as well as Kari Lake, as the article noted. And in Arizona, fellow failed gubernatorial candidate and election truther Kari Lake is taking meetings and saying things that suggest she too could get in. Wow. And I'll show you the clip that was floating around where she says she's seriously considering a Senate run.
Yeah. I am seriously considering a run for Senate. Yes, absolutely. Because just because they sold an election, we're so dangerous to them. I'm so dangerous to the status quo and this rotten.
Okay, so all the things you've heard before. You're dangerous to the very democracy that you're pretending to protect, because of the lies you're telling and the way in which you're causing people to no longer believe in the legitimacy of our elections without evidence. That's what's going on there. But it will be so terrifying and fascinating to observe if Mastriano jumps into a Senate race in Pennsylvania, if Kari Lake jumps into a Senate race in Arizona, how that will play out. As we saw, hopefully it will be similar to in 2022, where the election deniers were rejected. And I think the American electorate, generally the majority, is just not on board with this type of dishonesty, and she can't let it go because it's her identity now. She can't accept that she lost, so she couldn't possibly just say it's not a big deal. If the narrative is that it's stolen, that should be the biggest deal ever, right? And so then she'll be campaigning. I covered a similar Kari Lake story on the David Pakman show today when I guest hosted, and the way I kind of outlined it was she'll do the campaign of elect me in 2024 because I don't think I lost in the last election. Very interesting. Okay, next moment from this campaign, and this also highlights a very important and damaging aspect for the Republican Party of the Kari Lakes, of the Doug Mastrianos, Trump, etc., that we're seeing play out.
I ask you that every candidate who comes through, when they stand on this stage, when they're shaking your hand, when they're walking through town, taking your questions, that you ask them where they stand on election integrity. And I think you should get even more specific. Was the 2022 election for governor in Arizona stolen? And if they won't say absolutely yes, that's a big red flag. That's a big red flag. Ask all of them. I think you should ask Nikki and Vivek, and I'm trying to think who else is running. Who's running? Hutchinson? Oh, yeah, that's right. He mentioned it. Okay, all these people. Ask them all. Ask, when Ron DeSantis comes, ask him where he stands. And ask President Trump. And I'll tell you what, I know that one of them will be honest with you about these elections. And one of them is Donald J. Trump. Right?
So there you're seeing this reality that's going to damage, if it doesn't first do, irreversible damage to our democracy. It will, if we get through that, damage the Republican Party significantly electorally, because that's going to happen. We've looked at polls recently. 63% of Republicans believe Biden's election win was illegitimate. So if they're believing that, Kari Lake's telling them, and they buy into her lies, that top priority, they need to be asking these candidates and using as kind of a barometer for their support, these candidates. Was Kari Lake's gubernatorial election stolen? And then the reality that so many within the GOP believe that will pressure candidates to pretend to buy into that narrative to get the support of the base, and thus will do so much damage to our party, but also to our country, but also to their chances in general elections. Because in the primary, they'll do that to win over the base. In the general, they will hopefully be defeated based on the radical nature of their stances on democracy, on our elections, and the detached from reality stance that they're at least pretending to believe in. But there it is, Kari Lake, once again I say, going around the country, doing her little "I lost but wish that I didn't" to her.